Ivy and Bean get to work. The first problem. Lost and found. After school, Bean and Ivy rushed to Pancake Court to get started on their treasure hunting. But once they got to Bean's house, they decided to keep up their strength with healthy food. Healthy food meant fruit. They ate some raisins. Then they ate some pickles, which were sort of healthy, or at least not unhealthy. Then they had some chocolate milk. Milk was good for you. They spilled a little chocolate milk powder, but fortunately they licked it up. Even more fortunately, they licked it up just before Bean's dad walked into the kitchen. "Hi, kids," he said happily. He was always excited to see them when they came home. "What's the big plan for today?" Ivy and Bean exchanged glances. They were glances that said, "If we tell him what we're doing, he's going to make suggestions. We hate suggestions. Better change the subject." "Dad," said Bean, "have you ever lost money?" "Lost money?" Dad got a grumpy look on his face. "Yes." "Really? The things you find out about your own parents. How much?" $256. Whoa, Nellie, that was a lot of money. You could buy almost 2 metal detectors with that. "Where'd you lose it?" Bean asked. She hoped it was nearby so they could dig there. "Where'd I lose it? Get this," Bean's dad huffed. "I spent $256 on printer ink, and then, 3 days later, tops, the darn printer breaks. And of course the new printer doesn't take the old ink. Total waste, complete bust. And would the ink place take the ink back? No, I wrote to the Better Business Bureau, and do you know what they said?" Bean and Ivy stared at him. What on earth was he talking about? Ivy put her napkin down. "Thank you for the delicious snack." "Yeah, Dad, thanks," said Bean, sliding out of her chair. "We're going to go out in the backyard now to get some exercise." The shovels were easy peasy. There were plenty of good shovels in Bean's shed. Now they were all ready. Time to start digging. Bean's backyard was big. There were lots of places to dig. The problem was that Bean had already dug in most of them. Under the trampoline, Bean had buried a pair of tweezers and a jar of rice there just last week. Beside her plastic playhouse, there was a big worm pit there. In the middle of the lawn, Bean and Ivy already knew exactly what was buried there. Mysterious bones. They sure weren't going to dig in Bean's mom's flower beds. And they both knew that if they dug up the patio stones, they'd be in timeout land forever. "Let's go to your house," said Bean. Ivy's backyard looked like a place someone would bury treasure. It was the same size as Bean's yard, but it wasn't full of playhouses and trampolines and flowers and stones. It wasn't full of anything, except tall grass. In one corner there was a tree, a perfectly round pond, and a rock, but the rest of it was tall grass. "Where should we start?" said Bean. "By the rock?" "Shh," Ivy whispered. "Let me get a sense first." "Oh," said Bean. "Okay." She watched Ivy get a sense. Here's how it looked. Ivy stood very, very still, with her eyes closed and her arms stretched out. It was boring watching Ivy get a sense, so Bean tried getting a sense herself. She closed her eyes, stood still, and put her arms out. "Where are the jewels?" she thought. She thought hard. Jewels, 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 like a big, glittering red ruby. She wouldn't put it in some dumb ring. She'd put it in her pocket, like it was only a toy. And then she'd pull it out, and everyone would gather around to look at her glittering red ruby. "This?" she'd say. "It's okay, but you should see what I have at home." They'd be so jealous. Wait, this was probably a sense. She was getting a sense about a ruby. "Ivy," she whispered. "Shh," whispered Ivy. She was still standing with her eyes closed. "I think I'm getting something." "I have one already," Bean said. "I got a sense there was a ruby around here, a big one." Ivy opened her eyes. Where? I'm not sure where, Bean answered. You work on that part. Ivy began to chant. Ruby, Ruby, tell us where you are. Ruby, Ruby, are you near or far? Wow, thought Bean, impressed. Ivy's a poet. Suddenly, Ivy opened her eyes. Suddenly, she pointed her finger to the tall grass in the middle of the yard. There, she cried. Worm treasure. Ivy and Bean loved to dig. They dug and dug, dirt flying through the air. They sang a digging song. Gold and rubies and rubies and gold. Gold and rubies and rubies and gold. And the hole got bigger and bigger. They found plenty of roots. They found some sticks. They found dirt and stones. But they did not find a ruby. Maybe the wind blew my hand in the wrong direction, Ivy said after about half an hour. She dropped her shovel and closed her eyes. Ruby, Ruby, tell us where you are. Ruby, Ruby, are you near or far? Bean waited. Ah, Ivy said. No wonder. We need to move over a little. Right there. She pointed to a spot farther away from the fence. Again they dug. Again they found plenty of roots, some sticks, a few bugs this time, and some dirt and stones. Again they did not find a ruby. I'm pooped, said Bean. I need a rest. They rested in the shade of the tree near the pond and the rock. You know, said Ivy. She turned to look at the rock. If I were going to bury treasure, I'd bury it next to something that stuck out, so I'd remember where it was. Ivy paused. For instance, next to a rock. Bean turned to look at it too. Or under it. In a flash, they were on their feet, rushing to the rock. The rock was big, but it wasn't huge. It was about the size of an extremely large dog, or an extremely small bear. And if an extremely large dog or an extremely small bear was pushed very hard by two 7-year-old people at the same time, it would roll over, which was what the rock did too. Beneath the rock, 1,000,000 worms and bugs were crawling and scuttling. This is exactly where I'd hide a ruby if I had one, said Ivy. I'd bury it and put worms and bugs on top to scare people away. Bean nodded. It was where she would hide a ruby too, if she had one. With her shovel, Ivy carefully lifted a layer of wormy and buggy dirt and set it aside. Bean did the same. Then they began to dig. This time they didn't sing their digging song. They just dug. And dug and dug. By the time they had to go inside for dinner, there was an enormous hole where the rock had been. They had found more bugs, more worms, and more roots. But they had found no ruby. They had found no jewels, or gold, or money. They had found no treasure at all. At dinner that night, when Bean's mom asked what she had done in school that day, Bean almost told her about treasure hunting. Just at the last minute, she decided to keep it a secret. She didn't want to tell her family that her first day of treasure hunting had been a bust. She would wait until she and Ivy found the treasure, something gold and sparkling. She would put it on the table and say, "Look what I found today." Her mom would gasp and ask her how she'd done it. Then Bean would shrug and say, "I just had a sense." And after that, she'd buy everyone presents. So instead of telling her mom about treasure hunting, Bean said, "I learned you should never brush your hair over the sink." She talked about Narvin and his hairy pipes. Then her dad talked about the time he had taken the sink apart but couldn't get it back together. Then Nancy talked about how much better her life would be if she didn't have to share a bathroom with Bean. Then Bean's mom said that there were plenty of people in the world who would be happy to have any bathroom at all. And then Bean made her eyes really big and said, "I don't mind sharing with you, Nancy." And then Nancy huffed away from the table. So everything was fine, and no one guessed that Bean was a treasure hunter, almost a treasure finder.